Supporters of Burkina Faso's military leader have called for a mass rally in support of the junta after the government said it had foiled an attempted coup and accused America and France of influencing the country's politics. Since Traore came to power, the military government has cracked down on dissent, kidnappings and arbitrary arrests of both civilian critics and army personnel accused of plotting coups, which have increased. Here is our cover report.
Today, as a Pan-Africanist leader, you know that this is the path that you are treading on. You need a tight security. This is why I am happy to always see him being surrounded by his fellow soldiers who are well armed.
But why do you need a tight security? Why?
Why? Because we are seen as a threat. That's the reality. We have to understand that.
A threat to your own people or to the West?
A threat to the Western powers and a threat to some of your people who have some hidden agendas. Not every one of us who is black is automatically a Pan-Africanist. No, some don't even believe in that. Okay. They don't even think that we can move forward. Some have some personal interests, and they don't care about the well-being of their people. They care about their own personal interests above the well-being of their people. Not every one of us is genuine. That's the reality. So some of your people who may be used against you, I think even Malcolm X put it better. He said they will pay one of us to kill one of us just to say it was one of us. So if they come directly at you, people say that, okay, this is everybody will know. But if they use one of your people to kill you, then they can say, look at them. They even kill their own leaders. So the blame game comes back to us again. And this is why I think that every Pan-Africanist leader need a very tight security, because we have learned what happened to people like Patrice Emery Lumumba. We have learned from what happened to people like Thomas Sankara. We have also learned what happened to people like America Cabral. We have learned a lot from those incidents, and we don't want it to repeat. We want our good leaders to remain in power until they are done with their mission. But for the meantime, whilst they are in power, they need a very tight security, and they should not be naive about it. And the other point will be, in as much as you do good as a leader, you serve the interests of your people. Don't overstay in power. It is said that when a bird stands on a tree for too long, it attracts stones. And I think at some point, when people even need you most, that's the time that you should resign.
So today I have two gentlemen. So before we start the topic proper, I will allow them to introduce themselves. So first I'll start with you, Dennis.
Yeah. Good afternoon, wonderful viewers, and to the Historic TV, we are happy to be here. I am here on behalf of a movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens. I am their IPRO, and just to say a little bit about myself, I am a teacher by profession, and I teach history, government, and civic education that will be in St. Augustine. But I'm also a staunch Pan-Africanist ideology, somebody who is Pan-Africanist minded, or I'm a Pan-Africanist in such. I get acquainted with the ideology since my upper basic school. Then I start reading more about it, and I get more interested in the ideology. So without saying much, I will allow my colleague to also introduce himself, then we can begin to talk about the ideology in proper.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for giving me the floor to also introduce myself. Thank you, Ali, for inviting us, for being our host. Of course, I am Mustafa Estia. I am here representing the chairman of the movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens. And I am the deputy chairman of the movement. I am also a teacher by profession. Currently, I am pursuing my bachelor's degree, of course, and then we are keen followers of Pan-Africanism, and then we believe as the show unfolds, we will talk more about it by the grace of God. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for honoring our invitations. Yeah, from the movement called Nurturing Patriotic Citizens, of course, which each and every Gambian African should join, because we believe this movement are those that will teach African people about Pan-Africanism, nationalism, and of course for them to become conscious. I'll start with you, Dennis. Pan-Africanism. Tell the audience in more detail what is Pan-Africanism and where does it originate from?
All right, Mr. Traore, thank you a lot for that wonderful question. Now, when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we cannot talk about it without touching the foundation which is history. Now, Pan-Africanism as a concept started in the mid-19th century, and it is a call for all black people to be united, form a single race and a culture that will be recognized and respected by the white race. Now, if you know history a little bit, you realize that it's a time in which Africans were discriminated. And then this movement showed that, okay, if we come together and stand, perhaps we'll get recognized, we'll be respected, and we'll be treated with dignity. So the activities. Now, when we talk about activists in this concept or in this context, we are looking at those who are campaigning for the political change. And the pioneers of the Pan-Africanist concept were people like Henry Sylvester Williams from Trinidad. You have Edward Blyden, you have Marcus Garvey, and you have W.E.B. Du Bois. These were the activities of the Pan-Africanist concept. Now, as a concept, they decided that, especially Henry Sylvester, he saw that, okay, Africans were discriminated, or black people were discriminated, especially in America at that time. He said, let me call a conference. So he called the first Pan-Africanist conference, which was held in 1900. And there he discussed the issue of discrimination. It was in that conference that the term Pan-Africanism was first introduced by Henry Sylvester. And then it is in the same conference that, it's in the same conference that you have W.E.B. Du Bois, who said that he made a prophecy which happens to be true. He said the problem of the 20th century is the problem of color line. Then later in 1919, they called another conference. This time around, it was W.E.B. Du Bois in collaboration with Blaise Diagne of Senegal. And they said that in that conference that Africans, the native Africans, deserve or have the right, or must have the right, to participate in their government. Now, in this government, it means the colonial government. Then later, they call another conference again. That was in 1921. And in that conference, they discussed that, okay, why not Africans start to eventually participate in their own government? It was a gradual movement. They did not ask for self-independence at that time. No, they were just saying that self-determination may not be timely at that time, but at least they should participate in the affairs of their country. So they call another one before the end of the Second World War. And in that conference, W.E.B. Du Bois even said that we are not yet ready for self-determination because he was looking at Africa in the context of the European lenses. But the most famous one will be the fifth conference that was held in 1945, called the 1945 Manchester Conference. In that conference, they decided that we need immediate independence. And they said that, okay, that colonial boundaries that were set up or created by the colonialists was a deliberate attempt to stop Africans from political unification, which happens to be true, and I agree with them. Because if you look at all the problems we have today in terms of border irredentism, in terms of jingoistic nationalism, all started from there. So I will stop here for now because there's a lot to say, if not.
Thank you so very much. Now to Mr. Charles. I believe Pan-Africanism came into being as a result of colonialism, when the European powers sat down in Berlin in 1884-1885 and divided Africa into 54 odd nations, and Africa had never been the same again. Most of those African head of state who were advocating for Pan-Africanism, nationalisms, they were humiliated. Some were killed, some were ousted from power. And right now we are seeing young Africans advocating for Pan-Africanism. What is the picture for those people?
Thank you, Ali, for the question. I want to thank my colleague Dennis for also hitting the history, the way he started. If you look at the future of Pan-Africanism, there are hopes that things will change. Looking at the way in which things are unfolding at the moment, let's refer back to Burkina Faso, present. Burkina Faso, they had a leader. That leader who never did anything to uplift their country out of poverty. Now we've seen a young soldier, Ibrahim Traore, who has emerged. And all because he wants Burkina Faso to live a decent life. That is why this soldier, Ibrahim Traore, came and then made an overthrow and sat as a president. And right now we are seeing lots of developments happening. If you look at Burkina Faso right now, we see Ibrahim Traore and the team, the first tomato plant, which is expected to export tons and tons of tomatoes all over Africa and beyond. This is the spirit. You are there as a leader because this was fought a long time ago. If we talk about Kwame Nkrumah, he talked about unifying African leaders so that they pull in the same direction. This is what he saw, that African leaders, if we are not together, we will never be able to achieve what we want to achieve as Africans. And that is development.
Yeah, very profound, or so profound. Now to you, Dennis, again. Most of the African leaders at the time who were advocating for Pan-Africanism, as I asked Mr. Cham, I will of course answer the same questions. Most of them were humiliated. We have seen Kwame Nkrumah in 1996, he was ousted from power. We have seen Thomas Sankara, he was killed in Burkina Faso. We have seen many African people who were advocating for Pan-Africanism. Of course, they end up, some they were sent to exile, some were executed.
Yeah, I think.
What is the spirit of Pan-Africanism in our this generations? What is the spirit of Pan-Africanism in our this generations?
Anyways, I think the problem of them having to be humiliated is not something new, because even within the Pan-Africanist movement, there has been a division. When we were asking for independence around 1960, it's normally called the Year of Africa, because that's the time that most African nations were pushing for self-independence or complete independence. So we have a group called the Monrovia Group, and we have a group called the Casablanca Group. That is before they formed the Organization of African Unity. So the Casablanca Group is called Casablanca Group because the first meeting that they held was in Morocco, Casablanca in Morocco. So there you have our 7 independent African nations at the time who were radicals, who were calling for immediate unification of all the independent African states to fight against colonialism and to be totally independent. In that way, after they can perhaps form what we call the United States of Africa. That was the dream. It comprises of Ghana, you have Guinea, you have Mali, you have Morocco, you have Algeria, Libya. These were the Casablanca group. Then you have the other one, Brazzaville and Monrovia. They decided that, okay, if we should have that now, it may jeopardize, sovereignty. So they want to maintain the colonial boundaries, and in the same way, they also want to have collaboration or economic ties with the former colonizers. So they were a much flexible being. The others see them as lackeys of imperialism. So Haile Selassie said, okay, instead of having this division which will hinder our development, why not we have a meeting where all of us can sit together and discuss this in detail? So when they met in Addis Ababa, that was in May 1963, they decided to have a dialogue about it. And what Kwame Nkrumah said, if they have adhered to that, I think Africa right now will have been a different story. What we are talking about, this guy in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, what he is advocating for is not new. Recently I saw a petition, people are signing a petition that he should be the president of the United States of Africa, which I agree with. But this is not anything new. This started since the time of Kwame Nkrumah, when he said that let's form one currency, one army, and get united. In that way we can tackle the colonial masters, because they will be coming in other forms of colonialism. But people at that time, each one of them wanted to maintain his seat as president. And they eventually, all of them became, or most of them became victims. It's either you dance to the colonial tune, or you get coup, or in most cases you get assassinated if you are not very lucky. That's what happened to people like Amilcar Cabral. That's what happened to Thomas Sankara. That's what happened to Patrice Emery Lumumba. That is what happened to a lot of, most of them. Yeah, most of them.
Pan-Africanism,
not an exception, he was also coup.
Pan-Africanism advocates for united Africa.
Yeah.
That Africa should be united, whereby they will have one government, they will use one currency. But looking at the political fracas right now in Africa, we have in 55 old nations. So right now we are advocating for a united Africa.
Yeah.
Now, the European came and introduced that system of administration, some indirect rule assimilations we are seeing. Right now, we are speaking different languages as our official language. What is your take on these questions? Can Africa be a united Africa?
It can be, but I must also be realistic that it will be very, very, very difficult. Because looking at the time that the likes of Kwame Nkrumah were advocating for this, at that time we have less independent African nations. I think only 33 of them attended what we call the OAU at that time. But before that, I want to bring your attention to the Manchester, 1945 Manchester Conference. What was said there? They said that artificial boundaries and territorial boundaries that are drawn by the colonial master was a deliberate attempt to stop the eventual unification of African states, which Kwame Nkrumah at that time understood. He knew that if we don't form it now, it will be very difficult because by that time we are just talking about 27 independent African nations by the time that they held their meeting in Casablanca. Now imagine if it was difficult around that time, what will happen now that we are 50 something? So this is what the problem was. People at that time could not see what Kwame Nkrumah was seeing. He has the foresight of a giraffe, whilst they have the foresight of a chicken. What he is saying is today going to be very difficult for us. But whether it can be, I cannot say it cannot be. But I know that it's going to be very, very difficult for us to attain that United States of America, United States of Africa at this stage. Kwame Nkrumah tried it, they did not listen to him. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi tried it, it did not work. Now with Ibrahim Traore, I hope that Africans will be sober this time around to do the right thing.
Now, Mr. Chama, it was Marcus Garvey who said, no any other salvation for the Negro but through a free and independent Africa. That was Marcus Garvey. He struggled for the independence of the black people. And at the latter part, I believe he was in prison and then he died struggling for the independence of the black people, for the African people. Now that we are seeing young African leaders are imagined, speaking in a more eloquent manner that African people should be united all under one umbrella. Recently, I have seen a petition whereby they said Africa should have only one currency, that is Afro currency. In the spirit of Pan-Africanism, what are some of the ways that Africans should put into their minds that without Pan-Africanism, Africa will not work or Africa will not be united? What are some of the things that Africans should put into the back of their mind? That is, we have to unite or we perish.
Thank you. Unity is something that is very important. If we look at the confusion all over the world now, let me refer you back to what Pierre Lumumba said. In a competition of, in a business competition, it's a cutthroat competition. Mm-hmm. And if you are not united as one people, you will not be able to move an agenda. And that is why Africa has to unite as one people to be able to move an agenda. And the agenda will come in the later future if we are united. Now, looking at the West, the white people, we have been dominated, we've been colonized, and still we cannot say colonialism has gone completely. It has come in another phase. And that phase is what we have to understand as Africans and unite to be able to tackle that against the West or the white people. Because if you look at them, all they are fighting for is for their own good. Mm-hmm. Why not we as Africans do the same, unite as one Africans to be able to do the same thing? He talked about Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah did a lot when it comes to talking about Africans uniting as one people. Marcus Garvey, the same thing. And it reminds me of Bob Marley. Like Patrice Lumumba has said it, that Bob Marley, when it comes to Pan-Africanism, he did a lot. And he was even described as a buffalo soldier in the heart of America. So that is the spirit that we should develop as young Africans, so that this Africa that we live in will move to another level. Right now, if you come to my country, Gambia, looking at the way things are unfolding, if we are not united as Gambian and as Africans, we will lose the Gambia. And in fact, it has started. A host of important places that we can use to tap our resources, to be able to uplift our country, to elevate our country, to alleviate the poverty. A host of all those places are now being leased. Some are being given to foreign investors. Where are we as a country if we're talking about Pan-Africanism? We should refer ourselves back to those forefathers who fought for Pan-Africanism so that we will be able to learn something about it and be able to do something for our country.
So profound. We either survive or we perish. Of course, in 1963, when 32 heads of sovereign independent African state convened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in order to form an institution or an organization where African people could discuss and solve their problem, which was called the Organization of African Unity, and of course in 2002 it was changed to African Union to better capture the organization or the image of the organization. We have seen in that gathering, then we had Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Emperor Haile Selassie, Modibo Keita, Sekou Touré, most of the African nationalists. But in that gathering, they were unable to agree. In fact, as Lumba would put it, it was a toothless bulldog. So now that we are advocating for a united Africa, when our forefathers were there in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, they were unable to agree. So now, will it be possible for the current African head of state right now that we are having to organize a conference or to go and converge again in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to agree on the formations of African unity? Will it be possible?
I think in as much as, thank you for that wonderful question. I think in as much as they have the interest of their people in heart, any African leader who has the interest of his people in heart should be able to confide to a meeting if called, a meeting that has to do with the United States of Africa. I don't think that you should abstain yourself from it. Because we said, okay, by that time when Kwame Nkrumah said that, let's get rid of these artificial borders. One thing we have to keep in mind, these borders, we are not the ones who even demarcate them. That's the saddest thing. This was demarcated in the Berlin Conference, where no African leader was invited. It was Europeans that sat together in the Berlin Conference of 1884 and decided this is how we are going to, divide Africa like a piece of cake. No African was invited to set light on the geopolitical problems it's going to cause us in the near future. Nobody was there. So I think we are having to keep the same colonial borders as if this is something that has been divinely designed. It makes no sense. It's artificial. We can go back to the drawing board. When Kwame Nkrumah said this, a lot of leaders say that, okay, it was premature for them to do that. But after that, look at what happened. People like Julius Nyerere of Tanzania later wrote a letter apologizing that they were wrong and Kwame Nkrumah was right, because look at the eventual problems that it causes when they fail to unite at that stage. And it will make it more difficult now for us. What will happen if we continue to insist that we cannot unite, we go on our separate ways? They will come back again and still colonize us. This time it's not going to be that original colonialism that we know, but it's going to be in the form of a neo-colonial movement, and it's going to be in economic aspects. And that's exactly what is happening right now. So I think it's time that African leaders sit together and think again. We have made a mistake and we learn from that. We know that this is not the way forward. Right now, I don't think that there should be any reason why we should stop. And thank God, a lot of Pan-Africanists are coming to power. I think it's in fact high time that Pan-Africanist-oriented individuals stop just having the dialogue, but also engage in politics. At the end of the day, when they lead their countries, they can come back and make that particular decision for the United States of Africa in the near future. Because I don't see how Africans are going to develop, how Africans are going to be free from colonial domination, that is neo-colonial domination, if they are not united. I don't see any way about it. There is no way out as far as Africans are not united.
I believe your mindset is based on Pan-Africanism. What can you people do to inculcate the spirit of Pan Pan-Africanisms in the young Gambians that are coming up, our future leaders? What can you people do?
That's very good. That's a very good question. Anyways, we already started, and we held series of activities. I think we first went to schools, try to sensitize the students on on nurturing sovereign citizens, what it is all about, how to be patriotic as a citizen, and just sit there and do nothing and complain about how the country is moving, but your own individual contribution towards the well-being of the state. So we have been doing that. We have been to a lot of schools for now. And also we went to Carton. We went for a community outreach. In that way, we asked people, engage them. And to our surprise, a lot don't want to participate in politics. That's what we call political apathy. But then we asked them, if you don't want to participate in politics, and you are complaining that the country is not moving in the right direction, then you are part of the problem. Because if all of us sit down and fold our arms, then how will things change? Nothing will change. And the other funny thing that I observe within this short span of our community outreach and going to schools is that Gambians actually, we know the problem. But our attitude towards the problem, that's the problem to me. How do we vote? How do we decide who to vote for? Gambians vote based on sentiments. And when I go to schools, I always use one Greek logic there. The Greeks were very wise people. Right now, if you ask somebody who is a citizen, they will just say a legal member of a state. But the Greeks had something different in mind. And I always use that example, that in this society, we always have three categories of people. You have the idiots. These are people who are totally negligent. They don't care. They litter everywhere and just don't mind. Then you have the tribesmen. These are people who will never vote for you because they don't share the same tribe with you or they don't share the same region with you. And I always say it. Even if you vote for somebody that is in the same region, that person is not there to take you to heaven. So you voting for somebody based on religious affiliation does not help. Look at the content of the character of the person and vote for the person based on that. But to say that things like sentiments like religion and tribal issues, that's the reason why you are voting for somebody, will not move. And then you have the third category of people. They are the citizens. These are a category of people who don't care about your tribe or religion. They vote for you because you have the idea and because you have the content of character to lead. Those are the true citizens according to this Greek classification. And I agree with them. To be politically correct, we just say that as far as you are 18 years, you have the voter's card, you vote. But let's look at it. In a democratic system, all of us vote. The vote of one wise person is the same as the vote of one foolish man. One vote. At the end of the day, these are democracies backfiring. Because you should educate the citizens first. They should be aware first before you bring democracy. But if the citizens are not aware and you bring democracy, at the end of the day, democracy is about numbers. Whoever has the highest lead. So people will be making decisions based on numbers instead of knowledge. And for you to have a good leadership, the decision has to be based on knowledge instead of numbers. So this is why civic education, things like this, going out to sensitize people is the key foundation. Without that, your democracy is going to backfire. It's not going to serve you well. And that's exactly what is happening in the Gambia and in a lot of African nations. Yeah.